Hello, I'm Stephanie Lemick. I'm the founder and CEO of the Wounded Workforce, and I am so excited to have another amazing panel pulled together for a super important conversation on how trauma-informed workplaces support DEI. Especially interesting conversation topic as we are navigating increased scrutiny of DEI in the workplace and in the world. So to kick us off, I would love to have each of our panelists introduce themselves. And I will kick it off by having you introduce yourself, Alestin. Great to have you back with us.
Hi, my name is Alestin. I'm a therapist and also a clinic director at a mental health outpatient clinic in Omaha, Nebraska.
Awesome. Great to have you. Julia.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm a senior strategic people partner, and my background has been mainly on the talent side, but within the entire people function. So HR, talent, recruiting, etc. Happy to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. Great to have you. Colleen.
Yeah, my name is Colleen Seringer. I'm the founder of Colleen Seringer Fractional Consulting and Advisory, and the services that I provide are specific to workplace culture. So I have been working in the industry for 25 years, have seen a lot change and have seen a lot stay the same. So always an honor to be at your table, Stephanie. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. And Anessa, wrap us up.
Yeah, so I'm Anessa Fike. Thank you again for having me, Stephanie. Always enjoy these panels and the invitation, so thank you. And I am the founder, CEO, and fractional CPO to Fike & Co. and many organizations around the world. So I have worked with more than 120 organizations in 30 plus countries over the last 10 and a half years of being a fractional CPO. So excited. And as Colleen has said, I have seen a lot. At this point, there is really nothing that can surprise me. so here we go. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. And then Anu was supposed to join us today, and want to thank her for, being willing to have this conversation. Unfortunately, she is under the weather. Certainly, we will miss her voice in this conversation, but look forward to having her join us in the future. So to kick it off, you know me, I like to start from a place of shared understanding. So want to start with a little introduction to our topic today. Our lived experiences show up for each of us in the workplace. For some of us, more subtle than others, but if you reflect, they're there. A key, a key principle of trauma informed workplaces is acknowledging the impacts of cultural, historical, and gender issues on the experiences and perceptions of trauma, both individually and as communities. Societal expectations, power dynamics, and cultural norms associated with these factors can contribute to diverse types and intensities of trauma. Without acknowledging this, organizations fail to understand and acknowledge the scope of trauma, which is at the heart of being trauma informed. While trauma informed efforts should support DEI efforts, they cannot replace them. I think this is a really important point that we want to talk about today. Trauma informed workplaces support and partner with DEI. They do not replace these efforts. These practices must exist in partnership within an organizational culture for the best impact. So I will stop talking and start kicking off questions to our amazing panelists. I do want to be transparent because we are talking about DEI and we don't have the most diverse panel today. I know we are missing some voices. I think there's a lot of diverse aspects of each part of us. So certainly invite additional diverse opinions in the comments. And also we recognize we're not capturing all perspectives. That said, I still think we'll have a really amazing conversation. Especially you've seen all of these panelists join us before, and they have incredible insights. With that, let's talk about why this topic is important to each of you, personally, professionally, or both. And I'll open it up to whoever wants to jump in.
I'm happy to kick us off. So as I was thinking about this question, this is where my mind went. So I for myself personally, I'm a big advocate of advancing female rights, confidence, pay, leadership, not just inside the workplace, but outside the workplace. So I wanted to make sure that I really blended those two things. I think, the more I talk and network with women, I hear the conversation of defining our own path, like ensuring that one isn't being defined for us. So I think that also kind of lends into why this topic is really important to me. And then all of that, I think, takes me to, I owe it to not just to myself, but to everyone around me, regardless of gender, regardless of age, regardless of how you identify, right? To be a part of the solution in the conversation. So that's why it's important to me.
Love that. That's great.
Hi. When you just kicked us off, just highlighting the obvious of like, look at us, and the what we offer as far as like diversity, what came to mind for me and what's present is that we need to recognize our privilege in order to be an ally. And I think that, obviously being in the HR space and having a really big, important task, I think, for different companies to bring people in that are the most qualified, and what does that mean, et cetera. There are a lot of underlying components that it is my responsibility to be educated on and to expand that education and information to whichever environment I'm in, whether it's professional or personal. And so to me, this topic is really, it's like, if you don't talk about this, then you're missing a major mark. And then another thing that I was thinking about coming into this conversation was one word or one letter that's missing, which is the B, which is the belonging piece. And for me, that is a really additional important component to the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. Excuse me. Because I think that we all have this need to belong. And as Brene Brown says, she's like, the opposite of belonging is fitting in. But we all want to fit in and we all want to belong, right? So how do we take these macro definitions and apply them to all facets of life, whether it's the workplace or, everyday pieces that we participate in? So that's where I'm at.
I love it. I love the call out for belonging. I think that's an important addition for sure.
Awesome. Well, I'll jump in. And why is this topic important to me? So I, for whatever reason, have this deep calling in my bones to help support everyone in the workplace. And the workplace has not been for everyone as long as we've known it, as long as we've been alive. And as Julia adds the B, I'm going to add the J for justice. And so for me, it's really important because I think that we happen to default, not happen to, it's put in place for a reason, by the powers that be. It defaults to whiteness, right? And it defaults to men. And so that's what the workplace was set up to help thrive and be successful. And when I say the workplace has not been for everyone in our lifetimes, and as long as we've known it, it's been true. It's been set up for white men for a really long time. And not to say that other people haven't, Joya, to your piece, haven't found success and experienced privilege, because of course, a lot of us have. But also there's this justice dynamic to both DEI and trauma-informed workplaces, where I want us to go back and get real around, where have we missed the mark? Where have organizations just glossed over for too long? we need to go back and make those right. And we can't build upon something that is so supremely divided and uneven in that way. We really need to go back and say, where have we really missed the mark? We need to really make sure that those demographics of people, those populations of people, we need to make that right first before we move forward. And that's where the justice piece comes in for me, is really kind of making sure we are looking across the spectrum and say, there's been harm here. And this kind of goes back and forth between trauma-informed and DEI. There's been harm. We need to make sure that harm changes from harmful to helpful first, and then continuing to build on that. So from a professional and personal standpoint, this is just like ingrained in my being to think this, to be this way, to fight for people fiercely. I hope when I die on my gravestone, it says she fought fiercely for those that don't look like her, because that is in my bones. And for those who have known me for 20 plus years, they were like, you've always been this way. And so for me, it's just like, this is who I am. I don't know how to be any other way. And so I see so many injustices happening just in DEI and organizations that we've got to get serious about how to make those right. And it's not always positive. Sometimes it's hard. And sometimes those conversations are really difficult and exhausting to have. But to Joya's point, again, we have to pull that out and we have to talk about it. And we have to acknowledge things. And we've got to acknowledge that there was harm being done. So really long way to say it's important, because I see the harm that it's caused when we don't talk about this.
Anessa, I love that. And I want to, add, we talk about a principle of trauma-informed workplaces being humility and responsiveness. And those two things are together, because acknowledging something is wrong is important, but it is the response and it is the action. It is seeking to repair that is, that full circle that really gets to what that principle is looking at. So I love that. And just for me, like light bulbs went off around that connection.
Love that. Well, thank you. Yeah.
Alestin.
Yeah. So as a Palestinian American, the last several months have been very difficult. People don't necessarily acknowledge that nationality or ethnicity in this country. And if they, well, I don't know, this social media has gotten kind of weird lately. It's been kind of back and forth, but historically, and I'm pushing 40, so historically, it's not been acknowledged. And if it has, it's been demonized. You also see that with, and just in America, Arabs are considered white, so it's not technically a minority like in the workplace. Asians are the same way, however, and I'm a little Japanese as well, or a quarter, a little. Asians also are not really given a category. They're also considered white as far as education and in the workplace. But since COVID and, way before our lifetimes, Asians have also been demonized in this country. So yeah, I mean, I think it is really important to look at trauma wherever groups of people are, including work.
I think it's so well said. I think it's so important to remember that diversity isn't always visible, and that trauma isn't always visible. And so I think, again, this is where there is that strong connection, that strong partnership between diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice, and trauma-informed workplaces. And I feel like coming in hot. I think it's just hanging out with Anessa. I'm like, it gets me all feisty. But I want to come in hot with the question that, a lot of us probably have. And it's, what do you make of the current backlash to DEI programs, both in the media, in the defunding of initiatives within different corporations and internal programs, just some of the discourse floating around out there. I don't know what else to call it.
She's ready. She's ready to go.
I'm ready. You just opened that door, Stephanie. Thank you for that.
Run through it. Run through it.
Oh my gosh, I could talk for hours about this. Okay, so I come back to, do we know why this backlash is happening? Do those of us who have worked in this space understand it from sort of a psychological standpoint? Yes. What I come back to is there is a deep, deep, deep insecurity from those that are fueling this backlash. It comes from a place of insecurity, of fear. They are just supremely upset and fearful that they're going to lose their spot, or people are going to find out they're not actually good at their jobs, or people are going to find out the default to whiteness is an illusion, which, by the way, like, there's no reason that white people are any better than any other people. It's like they're just upset that this illusion is going to fall, when realistically, again, those of us who have done this work and been in this space for a long time, we all know that it's like, there is no person that's better than another. There is no group of people that is better than another, not realistically, right? Systems and rigid structures and institutions were put in place giving us this illusion that there were, but in reality, it doesn't work that way. And so for me, it's this backlash is just, I just see all of these like deeply insecure people saying, I'm so fearful that you're going to find me out, right? And it really comes back to, if they were confident in themselves, if they were confident in their work, if they were confident in how they showed up in the world and what they try to do for other humans, they wouldn't have this backlash, right? They wouldn't have this backlash against DEI to try to help others. Because what DEI in my mind actually does is it really tries to help level the playing field. That's ideally what we're trying to do. We are literally trying to level the playing field. It shouldn't be that difficult of something to be able to comprehend. But I think when you're so deeply insecure and you are so just deeply fearful, leveling the playing field seems just like, so far out there that you can't even comprehend. So for me, I just look at all of these people, the Elon Musks of the world, et cetera, and just go, wow, there's a little bit of pity that comes in, right? Where it's like, wow, okay, that's how you view the world, I think that I think the strongest companies, the strongest leaders in the workplace are going to be those that stand up and say, DEI is here to stay. We're moving forward in helping others. And I think 5 or 10 years from now, we are going to see written in history the ones that stood up and said, I have a backbone and I'm standing for this DEI. And honestly, the ones that are scrapping their DEI teams, scrapping their resources, they may not even exist 5 or 10 years from now, realistically, right? Like they might not even be around. We may have never, someone might say the name of a CEO of one of those organizations. No one may know who that person is. And so again, I just come back to like, why? What is at the deep root of this? And to me, it's just a glaring insecurity and fear. So I'll kick it to someone else. That's my theory.
Well, Inez, I think we can all go home. I think we're good. No, I mean, you said it so gracefully. The couple of things that I was just like, what was jumping in my mind that I would overlay on that is, it's fear of losing power, right? It's fear and power. And it's, it just makes me want to barf, know, just because it's those two things. And I think the other thing that I would overlay is that, of course, my brain just escaped me. Oh, for the organizations that are like, you know what, we're done, we're going to take it off. They weren't committed to begin with. They were checking a box. They had zero interest in actually doing anything. It was what kind of pretty bow can we put on it? So those are just a couple of things that I would add. I think you said you hit some great points.
I think for me, also in the vein of you bringing up the word justice, what comes up is if it's hysterical, it's historical. And so I know that I mean, especially for us, that this is our field and we're like, you can't take this away. What do you mean? Kind of thing. It's just like, there's also this stepping back, zooming out. And yeah, it feels extremely like a huge injustice that this is happening. And I agree with everything that everyone has said so far. But I also think that there's this component of shame that ties in with trauma that we all carry, right, whatever that means to us. And I think that there's this component of, especially within the patriarchy, to not look at shame and to shove so much down and to not magnify, but to minimize what is going on when something isn't right or when you're trying to make something right. I think it's like we're bringing to light something that has to change. Like we're in a time and space where it's like the opposite is no longer an option. And everyone is shouting that from the rooftops. And so I think that a lot of leaders, a lot of organizations retract because of this shame factor. And I'm not justifying, nor am I saying like, oh, it's cool because it's because of shame. Then like, well, poor them. No, I'm not saying that. But I also have to recognize, if we just like close our eyes and take away everything that we see in our day-to-day life, aka all the ways that we see differences, if we just like hone in on the human factor and on the humanity, and like people are afraid to recognize that they need to take a stand on things that aren't working anymore, right? And so I think that is such a big component. And I think we were having this conversation in a different panel around shame, but I think that that factor in itself, which I mean, I alone cannot rectify, and I'm just here to like highlight something that I think needs to also be shed light on. But I think shame is like such a big driving emotion that especially men in the workplace, especially men in positions of power, don't know how to reckon with. And that is an injustice in itself, right? So it's like, why is it my responsibility to sit here and vouch for things that are important, that should be my birthright just because I breathe and exist? Like, why should I sit here and be like, oh, it's okay that you don't recognize these things or that you're taking away from something that is so needed? I'm not taking away from any of it, but I think that we just have to have a bigger conversation around why these things are happening. And, what is like, we all have a responsibility to take a stand and make a difference.
I think the shame point is a really interesting point. So like the natural reaction to shame is to avoid it. People do that every day. We all have shame. It's fine. So, I mean, yes, there could totally be people who are actively trying to keep other people down. And I'm sure that happens all the time. I don't work in corporate America, thankfully, so I don't deal with that as much. But I think it's also possible for some of those people to maybe be reacting to their own shame and looking at other people's different abilities. If we're talking about DEI and we're talking about maybe employees that are differently abled, and a lot of ways that people with shame is like toxic positivity. So maybe they are like not considering what other people can't do just like everyone else, not in a malicious way, but just as an oversight because they can't themselves deal with it emotionally. So I think that shame point is really important to recognize. Like, am I projecting my own shame onto my employees? And do they even have shame about why they're different? Because they probably don't. They're adults and they've dealt with this their whole life, potentially.
I'm the worst host because I'm like, right, I have like thoughts too. I'm always interjecting. I can't just be the question lady. I don't know. But I think these are all such incredible points. And what's so interesting for me about our conversation here is how I actually ended up founding the Wounded Workforce was because I sat through a conversation about DEI and all this amazing work that was happening and how it wasn't taking hold. And then the next conversation I sat through was about mental health crises. And as these things are different, they're also not different. And they're different, but they're the same. And I think sometimes, probably most of my adult life, we've been engaged in conversations about primarily white men that feel called out by DEI efforts, that feel called out by this push to be more inclusive or level the playing field. Men are 10% more likely to report experiencing trauma. I think that's the really interesting thing and the interesting nuance for me that, gets me really excited about the partnership between trauma-informed workplaces and DEI. Is this a way for us to call people in who haven't found that avenue to be called in yet? And to understand that the intentional or unintentional clinging to control and power may be connected to shame, it may be connected to a trauma response for them, maybe them protecting themselves. And I think as we have these conversations, they're hard, they're scary to have. But I think when people are willing to bravely engage, it's really a game changer for all of us. And, I'm very hopeful that we continue to drive these conversations forward.
Stephanie, I just want to say something that just kind of came up for me as you were saying that. I love that you gave that statistic about men because, look, I respect that they make up a lot of leadership positions, but I don't think they're all evil, right? Like I'm surrounded by some of the most supportive humans in my life, and that is because I know what I need, right? Like I built my world around that and have done a lot of personal reflection and things like that. So, I think we just, we can't dismiss that it's these challenges around a lot of, around DEI is not just men and women. It's women and women. It's right. Like it's like we have to call ourselves out. Like we're also right part of the conversation. And so anyways, that's just where my mind went as you were talking about that because I appreciate it. I never want, again, I just think about the wonderful men in my world and they are my biggest supporters and they will literally carry my luggage for me and they're out there.
Mm-hmm. I would say yes. And they are out there, but there's too few of them.
Yeah.
There's too few. And there are allies. Yes, there are. And this is a new term that I've heard that I think is amazing. So I think of active allies and accomplices in the same way. I think true allyship also requires you to be active every day, sort of like anti-racist versus not racist. And I would say, I've worked with literally hundreds, if not thousands of leaders at this point. 90% of them have been white men. I can count on one hand those white men that have been true allies in these moments. One hand out of thousands. They exist. There's too few of them. Because here's the other thing. If they wanted to change it, they would have. They have the most power. They have the largest power dynamic, right? In our country, in the US, for sure. If they wanted it to be better, it would be better. And so, yes, I hear that stat, Stephanie, around 10%. And it's, to me, what I think is, are they the ones who feel most psychologically safe to report? Are there other people who do not feel psychologically safe to report? Because if you asked me what I thought probably was the most trauma-induced groups, I would not pick white men. right? And especially thinking about our nation's history, everything that we've done, how we're continuing to add harm around the world, I would say there are far more specific groups of people that have way more trauma affecting them and may just not be okay coming forward about it, right? Or may not feel safe enough to report it, or may have lived with it their entire lives. So literally they don't know how to not be in a trauma-informed place, right? Like they may have not that it's trauma-informed, but they may not know how to live in a place where trauma doesn't exist, right? Because they've literally experienced it for the entire breadth of their lives. And so I think to this point, do I want to demonize all white men? No. Do I think there is a supreme capacity for way more white men to be active allies? Heck yeah. And I just continually ask them, why are you not doing more? And their response is comfort. Their response that I get 9 times out of 10 is, well, what do you want me to do? What am I supposed to do? Right? And it's like, I'm sorry, but you need to do your own work and decide what you need to do, right? There's a comfort mechanism because they're so safely wrapped in this blanket called power and white privilege that they don't feel like they need to go out and do anything else. And for me, that's a major issue. That is a major issue. Many of them may have experienced trauma, of course, but I think that there's also this like comfort level that they need to get up and out of to help others. And so that's just kind of my perception and my perspective on the data piece and then in general.
Love it.
So, Anessa, I have never met you before, but I am making a mental note to never piss you off. You
Amazing. Amazing.
I don't disagree with what you're saying. But yeah, I really love that you said a lot of people may have lived in trauma their entire lives and don't know like what anything else is. And I just wanted to add that they might not even realize that they are traumatized because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you don't know what you don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I also never want to piss you off. And this is hilarious, by the way.
I'm actually like a very kind person, but like I just my feathers get ruffled when we talk patriarchy and DEI.
Like both can exist, you know what I mean? It's like both can exist. You could be extremely passionate and also very kind. So please do not apologize for who you are because I think you're kick-ass.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah.
But what I wanted to say was that I lost my train of thought now.
Sorry.
No, you're totally fine. No, I think like you have a really good point in the sense that, that's where I was going, that you don't know what you don't know. And like in the vein of what you just shared about like literally a handful of those, folks that would literally are like, well, what do I do? How can I do it? And I think it comes to like motivation, right? And it's kind of like where we started this conversation. It's like, well, if like these DE&I efforts, aren't upholding now, then like they weren't like foundationally being utilized properly or looked at properly or implemented properly to begin with, right? So to me, it goes back there in the sense that everyone wants to live in comfort, and actually growth is on the other side of discomfort. So it's like really hard for us to want to go there. And also what's really present for me in this conversation is that I think there's fear around DE&I, meaning like companies, people, executives, white men are like, oh gosh, like this is something we have to do because it's like, it's a big topic of conversation. And it's like, but it's like, what is the root? What is the real why? Like representation, injustice, like all of these things. And it's like, we're not asking you to hold everything that got us here and make a change for like hundreds of years of things that you're reaping the consequences of, AKA like, we need to make a change now. But I think what we are asking is open your eyes, look at this. You're an active participant because you're in this world. So like, what are you going to do with it? Please do something with it. What are you willing to contribute to this conversation? And I think that, right, again, I'm not sitting here and I don't want to demonize either. I just think that this is such a powerful topic. And I think it's also very passionate for us. Obviously, we're here talking about it, and it affects us in different ways, personally, professionally. And for me, my profession is in HR, but personally, I've invested a lot of time to work on my stuff, my trauma, my language, my showing up, and how that comes together in the world is I am the same person. Like I can't compartmentalize and Julia personally over here, Julia professionally over there. I am one person. So as soon as people start recognizing that and bring their whole selves to the workplace, and instead of shaming themselves, take accountability, that's where the magic will happen, in my opinion. But I mean, of course, that's not like my formula for success, but like that's just where I'm sitting with everything that's being presented.
I think men do compartmentalize easier than we do, just their brains are different, you know? And so I think they can say, this is my personal life, this is my professional life. I think I'm a little avoidant and I can do the same thing. So, you know, I understand the frustration of people being like, well, what do you want me to do? But it could also be viewed as an invitation to literally give them a fucking list of what they need to do. And then if they don't do it, then you're like, well, see, this is who you are. But I think behind that question, and again, I can't hear tone or anything, is potentially like, please tell me what to do because I don't know what to do. And I'm a white dude. So like, I don't think I even am allowed to have an opinion on this because in some conversations, that's kind of the message that's given to them.
You guys are teeing up my next question so good. Like, and I always love a swear, so thank you, Alestin. So how can an individual show up at allies? And I love active allies or accomplices, Anessa. I'm definitely using those terms at work, as leaders, in their individual lives. And you know, yes, there's work that they can do to find out how, but you know, some folks are doing that work right now by joining us and listening in. So, you know, if you had anything you can share for how to show up as that accomplice or active ally.
I can kick us off. So I would say there's two thoughts here. One is what I often do is take white men through a privilege walk if they've never done one before. Those are very table stakes, very basic, but just taking them through a privilege walk just to let them see, right, how much white privilege they've had. And not even just white privilege, just privilege in general, right? Did you go to an Ivy League? Did you go to college? Did you have both parents at home, right? Some of these dynamics that have less to do with being white and more to do with privilege. Walking them through what I often do with leaders who give me just a glimpse of a doorway of an opening is saying, think of all the places you have comfort in your life. Go through your last week. Was there ever a point in your last week where you felt unsafe, where you felt you were in a place where you weren't supposed to be, where you felt in a place where you didn't belong, where you felt in a place where anyone looked at you as you walked in the door, right? And making them literally go through their routines over a week time and say, all those places you have comfort, people who don't look like you may not have that same comfort. And having them see it in a day-to-day and having them step one or put one toe into the shoes of someone else really starts to help them humanize this DEI space, because it does seem like this almost like this fluffy thing that's an intangible, that's like a cloud they can't grasp. But when you actually put it in front of them and say, walk me through where you go in a week, and I want you to try to think about all the places you find comfort where others may not. all the places you feel comfortable where others may not. The other part of this is that I think where a lot of white men get stumbled up on is they think that by not being actively racist, actively sexist, actively whatever-ist, all the ists and isms, that they are fine, right? And what I like to say to them is that's still harming. And my common thing that you'll hear me say is if you're not helping, you're harming. Because if you are sitting in your comfort and doing nothing, you're harming. You're adding to literally the white noise out there. You are harming. So if you're not an active ally or an accomplice, you are still harming. You're not sitting at neutral. And I think a lot of white men think they are sitting at neutral if they're just not doing really bad things, right? That's not the case. Them sitting at neutral means that they're actually continuing to add to the harm. They need to actively step out of that and actively be an accomplice to making these changes, because that's when they step into helping. And I think that distinction and walking through that with people, especially white men, is where they go, oh, shoot. And they start to then dial back to all the places where they sat comfortably and did nothing and thought they were in neutral, and all the places that they start to realize they were adding to the harm instead. So I think walking through and having those conversations with people can be really helpful to opening their eyes.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I'm a big believer of not skipping over this step of awareness. I mean, the kind of the phrase that I always use is, I need you to put on my glasses for a day. And I typically try to do something similar and walk. I mean, this to me is how I've supported the men around me to see what my world, just as a woman. I live in a very transitional neighborhood in Atlanta, Georgia. It is not safe for me to go out at a certain time of day. And so even just something as simple as like, let me just walk you through like a different set of lenses of what it's like for me to be in my neighborhood and the things that I can't do. I just think it's important to definitely try to pull through an extreme level of awareness. So that's just what I would add to that.
I think there are like inactive things that people can do that would help with empathy, understanding of their coworkers or employees. And that would be just like shutting your mouth. So sometimes people
yes to that.
will like have to work up to having a conversation with you. That's difficult for them. And you don't know what's going on because it's not an important issue for you, or you're just not aware that the issue even exists. So if somebody says something to you and it or like starts to say something to you and you start to get uncomfortable and talk over them, they will likely never speak to you again. And you have no idea what they were even going to say. Maybe you assumed they were going to say something else and you answered that question, but you've lost their trust forever. And then maybe they don't feel so safe in that workplace anymore.
Yes to everything. I think what's coming up for me is education. Like the way that someone can be an ally is to be more informed and make a different choice at the end of the day. And I love where you started us off, because it's like not saying something you are saying something by not saying something, or by not taking a stand. It doesn't mean that you're neutral. And for me, that is like, I love that you identified that, because something clicked for me, and I'm just like, wow, that is a major problem. Because I think that it's just like people who are like, yeah, I'm just not going to vote because like I don't know enough. And it's like, it comes to education. Well, you should be educated, you should care, you should go, it's like, you should care. But how do I motivate you to care? Like, I can't force it. I can't control anyone but myself, right? So it's like, how do we have these conversations? And I love what you just said as well about people just need to shut their mouth, because the biggest opportunity is actually being willing to listen and not speak most of the time.
Yeah. I love that. I very tactfully often encourage, coaching clients or partners to listen first and seek to understand. But I love it as simple as like, just stop, like shut your mouth and listen. I think that's an incredibly powerful and simple thing that's easy to do. Two things I really want to, add on, especially to what you shared, Anessa. I think privilege, I really want us to reframe, that privilege walk, or how we think about and understand privilege as individuals, as tools to better understand ourselves and how we are navigating through the world. I think for me, that is how I think about my own privilege. And I think it's super important. And I would even double down and say, especially white women in positions of power in corporate America, you need to be taking that privilege walk as well, because you are, existing in systems that are benefiting you as well. So I think it's really important for us to call that out too. And then, getting to the being in neutral, I can't tell you how many times I've had the exact conversation. Well, I'm not actively being sexist. I'm not actively being racist. I guess I would call out, if you really want to know how to be an active accomplice, an active ally, the next time someone says a joke or makes an offhand remark, instead of thinking it's okay to not respond or not laugh, and that made you part of the solution, I agree with you, Inessa. It's not part of the solution. To be part of the solution is to say, that's not funny. I don't think you should be doing that, and you shouldn't be saying that. Because, hey, I spent years working in construction. Some real interesting jokes got told in front of me, even as an HR person, which we can go into that some other time. But for me as a woman to have to be the one to interject and say that wasn't okay was hard. And I was taking a lot of risk. And there were so many men around who stood and did nothing when they could have said, hey, that joke about domestic violence, not funny. Like, that's not really okay. And instead, I had to take that step. And I would say that that's for all of us, certainly for white men, but that's for all of us. When there is a moment and when someone's saying or doing something that's really not okay, is there a safe place or a way that's safe for you to interject as an ally? So I'm such a bad host. I always want to talk. All right. So one thing I do really want to talk about, I think it's so important, so interesting, is the ways that historical and systemic trauma impact underrepresented groups and how that shows up in the workplace. And to add on to that, how DEI initiatives and systems can help address those issues.
I can kick us off again. I was going to wait to see if anyone else wanted to. Okay, so I wrote a whole book about this, Stephanie. Okay, so where does it show up? Everywhere. That's where it shows up. It literally shows up everywhere. I don't know that there's a place in the workplace where it doesn't show up, right? I think that it really shows up everywhere. And it shows up in weird ways sometimes for different people. It shows up in different ways for different people. It shows up in the too short Slack message. It shows up in the silence in a meeting. It shows up, right? Like, it shows up in different ways for different people. But I think that we have at least in this country, we have a country and a workplace system built on the white patriarchy and our horrible history as a country. And that history is built on horrific actions. And so to think that we have a workplace free of trauma, it just doesn't exist. And so I think it is in every place that we look from a workplace perspective. Now, do I think that it's insurmountable? No. Do I think that it takes thoughtful approaches to get there? Yes. And so the way to go about that, the best way forward, and all of us are in, this space, all of us are in this space of trauma-informed workplaces and being supportive of that, and also in DEI and HR and people. The places that are doing the best work in DEI and the best places where people feel welcomed, seen, heard, and that they belong are those places that are open to having real and uncomfortable conversations. That's where it starts. And that's where we have to start them. We cannot have a completely buttoned up workplace and still have a workplace that is open to being trauma informed. Those things don't go together, because what I have found in leadership is that the most buttoned up employees, the ones that do not want to be vulnerable, those are the ones who have not dealt with their own stuff. They're not open. They're not trauma informed. They're the ones that are putting up this facade of perfectionism that we know no human can uphold. That's blocking something. It's blocking others from seeing who they truly are. It's blocking others from their trauma. It's blocking others from their pain, whatever that is. We should be working on creating trauma-informed workplaces to have uncomfortable conversations so we can get to know each other on a more human-to-human level. And the way for us forward to do this is to just input as much humanity and empathy and support into an organization as we can, to the point to where it gets uncomfortable. That's where we start. We have to get back to the human dynamics. And I think if you don't have an organization or leaders that are open to that, you've got to work to get them there first, because those are the building blocks of any human relationship. If you think of any other human relationship where you haven't done that, a marriage, a friendship, family dynamics, right? They don't work for very long before getting vulnerable and opening up and having this human-to-human interaction. Why do we think it's going to then work in a human-to-human relationship with an employee and employer in the workplace? It's still a human-to-human relationship. We somehow have this illusion and this veil of work when we go into it, to where things start to get weird. Why? Right? There's power dynamics at place. There's a paycheck on the line. There's our livelihood, right? Those are the things that are different. But if you think about it from a human to human relationship, it really is about, it's still humans. We're still two humans trying to have conversations. We're still humans working with other humans. From what I know, there is no organization out there that is run by all robots, right? And so, not yet, at least. There is this human to human dynamic, and the employer-employee contract has changed. It has changed drastically. It needs to change more, but it has changed. And so we need to get to this space of creating a support mechanism, creating the safety, creating the thoughtfulness around allowing other people to get to their human dynamics.
Isn't it just money? So if you just hired a person where that was their entire job, and then paid them well so that you would keep a good person there, and then gave them a budget to do things that would reach out to all of the employees so they would feel comfortable enough to be themselves. I think it just comes down to money and where you allocate it.
I think you can do really good things with amazing leaders that don't require a ton of money, right? Even because if you think about it, people who, okay, let's talk about Wall Street. People make a lot of money. People have a lot of trauma when they leave. It's not just about money, because there are so many jobs that people take and they say, I'm in this job because they pay me a lot of money, but I freaking hate it, right? There's a lot of trauma they have.
Okay, I think I was not clear. I mean, having a DEI officer where that was their entire job, was just to focus on DEI.
Yes, if the leadership team gives them the proper authority to do their job and to make an impact.
But
you've got to have the impact. You can't just have the money. You've got to have the impact and the relationships to have the impact, for me, which is where it gets down to the human dynamic. They have to allow that person to have enough authority to make meaningful impact, which we've seen a lot of chief diversity officers that are friends of mine are like, I'm doing all I can in the space I've been given, but I've only been given this little space over here, and everything else I don't have access or authority to.
Okay. So it kind of seems like they're C-level, but really they're not treated that way.
Oh yeah, 100%. And we find this in HR too.
Okay.
That could be a whole thing. Like that could be a whole other panel.
I've been triggered by that. Yeah.
Right.
No, like, yeah, so am I.
It is triggering. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lesson you're onto something really important. There's the resourcing and funding. And
Yeah.
I think you see the best companies go all in, and they make it part of, they fund, they allocate resources, financial and human resources, and then people have real credibility, and there's like an expectation. It's part of the culture. I think the real challenge, though, and I think a really big problem with the current state of DEI is that a lot of companies with a lot of money threw some money at it and wanted their gold star, and it is incredibly performative, and you have a bunch of amazing minds, amazing leaders as it relates to DEI and in corporate America, who are basically like put over in a corner.
Yep.
And not empowered to take real meaningful action. So I think it's a yes and for sure when it comes to the funding and the resourcing, for sure.
And I think the other piece too that I just want to drop in really quickly, because I know we're getting close to time, but the other piece is that I want to just drop this in, is that this shouldn't just be one person's job. This shouldn't just be the leader's job. This should be the entire organization's job. And by the way, DEI should not just be this afterthought. DEI should, and trauma-informed workplaces, that all those thoughts should be ingrained in every single business decision. We're just not there yet. We've got to baby step it because people are so far behind. But realistically, this should be as much of a thought as, how much is this going to cost? What is it forecasted? This should be as much of a thought as, what do our customers want, right? Like, these are things that are discussed more often in businesses, when it should be DEI should be discussed just as much. And so it should be in every single layer of the organization, every person's job, every business decision should be focused on these things. We're just not there yet.
I love it. We are running out of time. I feel like an hour is never enough time. So thank you all so much. This has been amazing, as expected. As we're wrapping up, I would love to hear from each of you. If you have a recommendation for our listeners, a book, a podcast, article, anything you would recommend for folks who want to learn more or do more to take with them. And I'll kick it over to you, Alestin, first for your recommendations.
Sure. The Empathetic Workplace. I mean, it's a couple years old, so everybody might have read it already, but yeah.
I love that. I love Catherine Manning. Excellent. Julia.
I forget the author, I'm sorry, but the book is called Belonging, quite literally. Here I am. It's what I wanted to talk about, belonging.
Amazing. Colleen.
I'm going with the white man, Adam Grant.
That's for another panel on Adam Grant.
I love his work life podcast. I'm a huge fan.
Amazing.
I'm gonna hold that one. I'll hold my thoughts on that in for another panel. But like I'll yes and that. Okay, so I'm gonna name quite a few. I think I might name this on another panel, Stephanie, but these are all amazing. John Graham Jr., Plantation Theory. Yes, phenomenal. White Women by Sarah Rao and Regina Jackson. Gosh, there's so many. There are, hold on, I feel like I just did this the other day. If you've not already listened to I Hate It Here by Heba Youssef, that is an amazing podcast. Also, she's a very dear friend, which is amazing. If you haven't listened yet to Brown Table Talk by DC Marshall and Mita Malik, amazing. If you haven't yet read Mita's book, Reimagine Inclusion, also amazing. There are so many here. There's Janice Glassman. I hope I'm getting this right. Hold on, let me look at my my Amazon list really quick. But it's decentering whiteness in the workplace, also amazing. If you have not seen the movie Origin, I think every human being should see it. It is the best film I've ever seen in my life, by Ava DuVernay, which is based on the book Caste, by Isabel. Hold on, I will tell you in a second.
Wilkerson, right?
Yes, Wilkerson. Yes. If you have not read Deep South, which is really one of the most comprehensive and only comprehensive anthropological studies of the caste system in the Deep South, it is by Allison Davis and Burley and Mary Gardner. Amazing. If you there's lots of books and things to, if you haven't read any of these are all amazing. I would say start with those. But yes, also go see Ava DuVernay's Origin. You will cry throughout the whole thing, probably. So just FYI.
I'm obsessed with you. You're amazing. That's all.
Thank you.
I'm obsessed.
Oh,
Obsessed.
and my book, which comes out February 20th, depending on when this is airing. It's called The Revolution of Work, Fuck the Patriarchy in the Workplace at Bill. So if you also want to grab that, it is the start of what I hope is a movement to actually freaking change the workplace so that it benefits everyone.
Amazing. We're very excited for your book. I know I am. It has already been added to the reading list.
Yes.
And maybe you should host a book club, Anessa. I'm just thinking that. That was a hell of a reading list. So
yeah.
Thank you all so very much for all of your insights and the passion you brought to this conversation. I am so grateful to each of you. And thank you all for joining us. Our next panel discussion for March is going to be about toxic stress in the workplace. So looking forward to seeing you all then. Thank you.